Us. I'm Patty Katz, the president of Reach Out America. I'd like to do an update of some news that happened since we last met. And there's some good news. The virus numbers are way down in New York State. Today, Governor Hochul has lifted mask and vaccine restrictions starting tomorrow. And some environmental news. Reach Out America's Green Committee, we fought really hard. We did petitioning, we did letter writing. We even did a photo for our local papers where we were wearing hazmat suits. And it was all to ban the chemical pentachlorophenol. That's the chemical that went on the PSEG polls. So I'm really excited to say that the EPA has finally agreed to phase it out. So it just goes to show you that, our grassroots efforts they actually do something. It just takes a lot longer than we want it to. Also last week, New York State adopted an aggressive refiguration of the state's congressional districts. It positions the party to flip 3 seats in the House this year. And these new lines would shape races in New York for a decade to come, making Democrats the favorites in redrawn districts currently held by Republicans on Long Island, Staten Island, and central New York. And on the world front, the United States has repositioned 1,000 soldiers based in Germany to Romania. And it's also deploying 2,000 troops based in the United States to Poland and Germany as Russia continues to threaten the Ukraine. House Democrats on Monday introduced a short-term measure to extend government funding through March 11th. It's an effort to avert a shutdown at the end of the next week, since funding is currently set to expire on February 18th. And locally, Peter Fishkin was appointed head of the Great Neck Democratic Club last week, and we're all very excited that we think he's going to do a remarkable job. So please consider joining the club. There are many elections coming up that really need your help. So this evening, we really have a wonderful speaker, and it's going to be a great presentation. We met TJ Hatter at our June fundraiser when Attorney General Letitia James was our guest speaker. TJ is the Long Island director for the New York State Senate State Attorney General. He joined her office in 2015, and prior to that, he worked as an analyst in Suffolk County's Office of Performance Management, as a director aide at the town of Huntington and in New York State Assembly, and also at the town of Brookhaven, citizen advocate and manager of their 451 town, which I'm assuming is like our Nassau County 311 informational phone call. TJ's giving me the thumbs up over there, so I guess I got that right. And he has a ton of information for us this evening to share, and also some links and things that I will be sending out to our members after this meeting. So this should be really informative. We're really psyched for you, TJ. And please welcome TJ Hatter. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you very much. Good evening. My name is indeed TJ Hatter. I'm here on behalf of New York State Attorney General Tish James. If you're watching this on recording, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, whatever it is, time it is when you're watching. But thank you very much for having me here today, joining me here virtually. The last time, as Patricia said, I had the opportunity to be with this group. I had the luxury of being a supporting character. The superstar that is the Attorney General was here herself, and we were playing the role of Oprah and Conan O'Brien. Today, unfortunately, it's just Conan, although not as tall or talented, but I am very thrilled to be with you here today. I'm going to cover basically the 3 main places that scams come from, and then save plenty of time for some questions at the end. A lot of the questions that you have can be answered via resources that I've given to Patty already. There are links that we can share in the chat now, and since we're on computers, please feel free to peruse them. I'm not going to cover everything during this talk, because if I did that, we'd be here well past my bedtime. And I can't have that, or for myself or any of you. But again, I will spend plenty of time, and I do want to answer as many questions as you have, specifically because that's my favorite time in these presentations, because that's when you tell me about the scam potentially that I don't know about yet. Because the folks who are answering the phone calls, answering their mail, looking at their email, are always the first line of defense against these scam artists. And that's something that I'll be hitting on repeatedly throughout this presentation. The first area I do want to cover, though, in terms of where scams come from, is your home phone. And I'll start with a very personal story. My father has not willingly answered the phone in his and my mother's house for 40 years. That is how long they've been living there. It's a complaint and a fight every single time. And when my mom asks him over the course of these 40 years, why don't you answer the phone, Jim? He says, Doreen, if you leave it alone, it'll stop. And having worked for the Attorney General's office and dealt with all of these scammers that are oftentimes on the other end of your phone, I can tell you that my father is right. It probably isn't someone you want to talk to. And if you leave the phone alone, it'll stop. Having to inform my mother that my father was right infuriated her almost as much as the phone calls for 40 years. But let me talk about why that's the case. There are more than a few phone scams. I'll go over the most common ones. Most of the time, this is in person, so I would ask for a show of hands, but I'm going to look to Patty. My guess is most people here have gotten a phone call from someone claiming from the IRS. Yeah, I see. Okay. Oh, Patty. Okay, I see a lot of heads nodding yes, some mixed. I'll cover that ever so briefly since that's a very common one. Because oftentimes when I do this in person, I ask for a show of hands of who hasn't gotten that phone call. And you'll hear about this as things prop up in the calendar. Scammers operate almost like it's an episode of Law and Order, ripped from the headlines. So if your mind is on something like around tax time, that'll be what scammers will know you're thinking about, and they'll target their scams to that way. But let me just, again, put everyone at ease, whether you've gotten this call or not. Ladies and gentlemen, the IRS will never call you. If there is an issue with your taxes, and with you folks, there probably is not, but if there is, they will send something in writing, and there are offices here on Long Island that you can cross-check with your elected officials, whether that be Kathleen Rice or Tom Swazi. At this moment in time, next year, it will be someone different there. But be that as it may, you will be able to have communication with them, and you will know that you're communicating with the IRS. They're not going to cold call you on the phone. And there's a lot of scams that like this. The sweepstakes scam is another common one where, and normally, again, if we were doing this in person, I would ask for a show of hands, but it's someone offering you a free cruise or some other prize that's like that. They call you up and they say, the prize sounds fantastic. And the person is seemingly nice, oftentimes from an official sounding company with a vague official sounding title. And in that scam, they'll politely ask you for money. The money is to cover the taxes on your fabulous winnings or to book your trip now to this wonderful cruise. A lot of times it's a cruise. This time of year, you might be getting an increase of those calls too, because it's so nasty outside. And wouldn't we all want to be on a cruise? But again, as someone who can come on your Zoom and talk to you with the authority of the Attorney General's office can tell you, you didn't win anything. It's actually illegal for a sweepstakes or a lottery to conduct their business over the phone, period. It's also illegal to tell you you won a contest you never entered. That's basic fraud, period. But again, you did not win anything. And there are two approaches to dealing with this person on your phone. Ask for a name and a number, ask them to call them back. That usually results of them going from very nice to you to very shady very quickly. Or the second approach, my father's approach, is to not answer the phone unless you recognize the number. Let everyone else leave a message. As my father also likes to tell my mother, Doreen, that's why I bought the answering machine. That is, in fact, why you, ladies and gentlemen, have an answering machine. If it's someone that you do not know, if you do not recognize the number, let them leave a message. If it is a friend or a loved one with a new phone number because they changed their cell phone or calling from a different location, it's someone who loves you. They will leave a message. You will probably be able to call them back right away or pick up. If it's somebody else, you probably didn't want to talk to them very much anyway. And again, that is a good way of getting rid of telemarketers trying to sell you something who may or may not be scammers, or for somebody who claim they're from a charity asking for a donation. Charities actually are allowed to ask you for a donation over the phone. That's allowed. But you're probably better off taking the information, saying thank you, and then looking up that charity, which you can do through our office, actually. And Patty will have the information on that. So that way you can cross-reference if that's a legitimate organization that you'd be interested in donating your money to, if that was something you were in the habit of doing, which is a good thing to do if you have the extra money. Another phone scam, and this is one that truly infuriates me as someone who loves his grandparents dearly, is the grandchild scam. I'm going to spend time on this one, even though I think everyone knows this one, but this is being recorded and it drives Tish and me nuts. So I'm taking my full 5 minutes on it. For those of you who have not had this happen or have not heard of this before, someone will call you up and they will say that your grandchild's in trouble. He or she was hurt in an accident, or the car or other vehicle was hurt, need money to fix that, or the child again was hurt, needs money for a doctor, or was arrested. Oftentimes that's in a foreign country and needs money for bail. The key to identifying this scam, aside from everything I just told you it normally is usually the following sentence. Please don't tell his or her parents, or please don't tell mom and dad. Sometimes these scam artists will pretend to be your grandchild's friend. Sometimes, and this is particularly awful, they'll pretend to be your grandchild. They'll call up and they say, Grandma, it's me. Grandpa, it's me. I'm in help. Help me. And every time, as I said before, Tish and I talk about this, she gets angry, and we have that in common. And while all scams make us angry, this one's just infuriating to me personally because it would have worked on my grandfather. I lost him a few years ago, but he was mentally, physically strong and independent as all get out till the end. But he was 86 years old and his hearing wasn't great anymore. And he was incredibly selfless. So we thought I or any of my siblings or cousins were in trouble, he would have sent the money. And this was a smart guy who worked for the Dime Bank in Manhattan for 30 years. And among his clients boasted Willis Reed of the New York Knicks. And still, if he thought his grandson was in trouble, he'd send the money, because that's why, as he would tell me, Timmy, that's why I made it to begin with. But again, and there are lots of what these scammers are doing is preying on you as a good person in almost every instant. And I'll talk about the anatomy of a scam going on next, but let me please focus again on the grandparent scam. Please do not give these people your money. I know better than to mess with the love of a grandparent. Grandparents will run through walls for their grandchildren, vice versa, also true. And the people doing these scams are some of the worst people we come across. But here's how you beat them. Ask the caller for a number to call them back, and ask them questions about your grandchild that only they would know, your grandchild, or a real friend of theirs would know. More likely than not, they won't want to give you a number. Scammers typically want to keep the phone calls one-on-one. Scammer, victim. Involving more people complicates their operation, limits their cut of the proceeds, and then arouses suspicion on the other end of the phone often when stories don't go straight. So they'll probably want to keep it one-on-one. So they won't want to give you that number, more likely than not. And it's unlikely that they'll have the answers to your questions, the specific ones that only your grandchild would know. Common example of that, I actually got with a presentation that Tish and I did not too far from where we saw you guys. And the person stood up and said, I knew it was a scam because they said grandma, and my grandchildren call me Nana. And it's little things like that that are immediate tip-offs. You're not on the phone with somebody you want to be on with for very long. Number two, if you have this phone call in your life, ask for the number of the law enforcement agency or the car repair shop or the hospital where they claim that your grandchild or their car or whatever the circumstances are is at. Again, they will not want to give that to you. One-on-one, scammer, victim. Number three, if you're going through this and it's starting to sound legit or you're not quite sure, call their parents. What normally happens is that your children will be able to tell you, TJ couldn't have possibly been arrested in Puerto Rico last night. I just saw him at breakfast this morning. And then if it were my mother, she would add, TJ should not be anywhere where the sun is that strong, or else he comes back regular fried or extra crispy. But that's just my mom. If for some reason those don't work, number four, call your grandchild. People of my generation are notoriously bad at picking up the phone. But if we will pick up for anyone, it will be for grandma or grandpa. I'm not kidding when when I say the love is unconditional both ways. It is. We will pick up if grandma or grandpa's on the phone. We will want to know why. We will make sure everything's okay. Or if you can, text them. Your grandchildren will text you back anywhere at any time, on a date, in the middle of a class, with their boyfriend, girlfriend, studying for a test, in the middle of a movie, all kinds of places you probably wouldn't want to do that, except in this instance, when you're reaching out to them to make sure that they're okay. Reach out to them, make sure they're okay. Do not send these people your money. The best rule to follow in any instance where someone calls you that you do not know asking for money is this: leave it alone. It'll stop. Now, I started with a personal story. I will continue with one because, as I say, leave it alone, it'll stop. If they're a legitimate business or a family member really is in trouble, you'll be able to call them back. But I had a person at a presentation I was giving. I'll never forget this. It was in Suffolk, not in Nassau. We were in Blue Point. And this man stood up and he said, I like to answer these phone calls because I like to tell these people, and I need to censor this, exactly where to go. I'm paraphrasing the gentleman. And I know that every minute they're on the phone with me, they're not scamming somebody else. And I said, well, that's very citizenry of you, sir. I appreciate that. And in terms of telling them where to go, I'm not here to take away your hobbies. So, but what I could tell him, and I will tell you, is that when you do that, the person on the other end of the phone doesn't register that much. They're a scam artist. So if you tell them exactly where to go, it will make you feel better. And I do not discount the power of that. But what that person will do is mark down, whether it be in their routing technology or however sophisticated the scam they're running is, this person answers their phone. And that means they're going to try a lot more calls on you because you talk. And so the scams that I talked about tonight, probably not going to work on you now because it sounds like you heard of most of them before and we just talked about it, or you watched this video. But the scam that I don't know about yet, which you might bring to my attention in the question answer series, might, because you hadn't heard about that one yet. And it's really annoying when the phone rings, and it's going to happen more. So again, I'm not here to take away your hobbies, but that is a consequence of what happens. And the best advice is, again, leave it alone, it'll stop. When I mentioned before routing technology, let me break down what that actually means. The technical term is a silly sounding word. It's called spoofing. What it makes it do is it makes the number that the scammer is calling from look local, a 516, a 917, a 631, which makes it more likely that you will answer. And they use technology that calls countless numbers and only requires them to talk if someone picks up the phone. So they'll put on headsets, and I know I'm not a scammer and I don't play one on the computer, but it will look just like this. They will put on headphones like this, and in their headphones, all they will hear is a ticking sound. And that's their software technology on the computer in front of them, at the higher end ones, dialing countless numbers. And it only picks up when you pick up. And then depending on how sophisticated the scammer is, they might have in front of them the script of what they're working with that day or information about you, depending on where they can find that information. And I'll talk about where some of that is online. But again, these people will use whatever they think will work on you. And that's the next phase of our presentation, which is recognizing the anatomy of a scam. I've talked about some specific examples. Let me just help you with something again. There will be some that I can't warn you about, but they all fit the same pattern. These people use 3 techniques: kindness, fear, and intimidation. And it's whatever they think will work on you. Fear and intimidation are different. I'll explain how. But again, it's one of those 3 things: kindness, fear, intimidation. Kindness is the sweepstakes scam. Congratulations, you won a free cruise. Isn't this great? Just give me some money right now, and then you're booked. Fear and intimidation are different. Fear is your grandchild's in trouble. Send me money now. Intimidation is, I'm the IRS, you're in trouble, send me money now. But here's the hook. Here's what connects all 3 of those approaches. Immediacy. Give me money now. There's an immediate problem. Money will solve it. You giving me the problem makes that problem go away, but it has to be right now. And that's the key to seeing that it's a scam. There is no situation, ladies and gentlemen, where you pick up your phone and someone that you do not know has any right to ask you for money right now, like we're in an episode of 24 and it's Jack Bauer and everything's on the line. That's not how this works. If somebody's in trouble or there is a situation where your money is needed on an expedited basis, you will always be able to make a few phone calls make sure you have it in your account, all of those logical things. What these people are trying to do is take away your control, but you are always in control of who you talk to, whether or not you answer that phone, and whether or not you spend your money on something. Their whole attack is to take away your control, but you are always in control. And then the last area I want to cover, and then I do want to open things up for questions, because I said that's one of my favorite parts, is just the internet. I'm imagining I'm dealing with a very sophisticated crowd. We're doing this over Zoom, but just a couple of simple tips for anyone watching this. Make sure your Wi-Fi has a password. Make sure that password is easy for you to remember, hard for other people to guess. I have so many passwords for so many things because I work for the Attorney General's office. We have a lot of security. So sometimes I actually make a list, a handwritten list, and keep it in a very safe place in my apartment that somebody would have to break into to get in. And there's things more valuable here that they'd want before those passwords. So I feel pretty comfortable about those being there. Make sure that your password is strong, meaning it holds both letters and numbers, and that it's hard to guess. My password is the name of a girl I had a crush on in 3rd grade. I can tell you no one knows who that is, least of all that girl. And there are numbers and exclamation points and all kinds of other things in there as well, for those of you trying to guess. But that's my point. Make it hard to guess. Make sure you can keep track. And for those of you using email regularly, just be on the lookout for all of these links. You hear about these scams in the news constantly. Don't click on a link in an email from a name you don't recognize, first and foremost. But second of all, even if it is somebody you recognize, it's probably best bet to use your phone. That's something that I do personally. When I'm getting emails from people, I usually use I have an iPhone, most people do, but a Droid works just as well. If you have a phone that allows you to collect your email, open your email through that, because their software technology tends to be better in terms of intercepting any sort of viruses that could be in the email, as opposed to a laptop or a regular home computer. And then if you get an email claiming there's a problem with your bank account or your credit card, never answer it with any information. It may look official. It will certainly look, it'll look enough to make you feel concerned. So the last tip is, if you get an email like that, here's what you do. You go to your card. On the back of that card, I should have handed, here, wait, I do have one. On the back of your card, I'm censoring, will be a number. Call the phone number on that, which means that you will be on the phone with your bank or your credit card. And that way you will know if there's a problem, and that you are completely able to deal with it because you know you're on the phone with your bank or credit card company. I see in the chat, we have a couple of questions here. So Patty, I think I've talked long enough, and I encourage the opportunity to talk with you.
Great. That was terrific. Thank you, TJ.
Thank you.
You know, I think I know one question. I've gotten some questions from our executive board too. And one of the things that I think would be right off the bat, is there a number, I think everybody wants to know this, a phone number to get rid of like some of these spam calls, and especially on the iPhones. I mean, I'm getting calls all the time. I'm sure everybody that's here gets those crazy calls. And is there a phone number that you can recommend that stops some of these calls that actually
well,
work?
Okay, so there's two pieces to that. I think what folks, when they ask government officials for that, they're triggering a memory of one of the most popular things that the federal government has ever done, which is the do not call registry back in 2003. One of the most popular things the federal government ever did. It wasn't perfect. It had a couple of space exceptions in it, so it didn't block all calls, but it was popular. The problem is that the calls that you're getting are not necessarily from people who are at all interested in obeying rules or a do not call registry. So in terms of government, we can't do much. There are private companies. I'm choosing my words very carefully here. There are private companies and apps that do have technology that allows people to limit those. I'm always cautious about, as a government official, recommending a private company, but I have heard of them. I have heard of No More Robo is something that is popped up in the chat here. I'm repeating, I have heard people have had success with that. I've heard that there are different phone companies that people have in terms of their personal carriers that offer services if you contact them for it. So we've actually worked a fair amount with all actually 49 other attorneys general here in the United States of America to pressure telecompanies to provide these services for you, but it's run through them privately. So it would be an app or it would be the phone companies themselves. So I don't feel I don't want to get in trouble for giving you a number that perhaps I'm not supposed to, favoring one company over another, but those do exist. And the areas in the chat here that I'm seeing, it seems like the crowd knows about them.
Okay, great. Thank you. Also, I question here. Karen Rubin says, if you pick up phone but don't speak, then hang up. Does that invite more scam calls?
It registers that there was an answer, but that's an imprecise. It depends on the scammer. So if it doesn't do much, that it doesn't do that different than it getting an answering machine is in terms of statistical, how many calls you get.
Okay. Okay. So speaking of this, are these scammers, are they individuals or are there organizations that get together and hire scammers? I mean, is this, is it all of the above? What is a scammer?
That's a great question. There's a number of really good documentaries out right now, whether they be on Netflix or HBO Go or HBO Max, I think it's called now, about how all these scammers and how the internet has allowed the proliferation of them. And the reality is that scammers are all like that abused term of snowflake, but they are really there are patterns, but they can be as sophisticated as a big old style sort of boiler room that people picture. And it could literally be just one or two people with a computer program that has access to data. So there really is every scammer is different. Every scam is different. The things that we look for in terms of pattern and practices to try and identify them to protect folks, it's phone, it's email, a little bit direct mail, but a little bit less than that because people tend to not answer that as much. But the volumes we see are phone and email. And what's interesting is that, do you know, Patty, your folks might be interested to know this data. In 2020 was the last time that I saw data not impacted by COVID on this. The number one scam generation, do you want to guess who that was?
I can't even begin to guess. I don't know.
It was the millennial generation. Most people
Really?
think it would be baby boomer generation or because seniors we host these programs for seniors, but actually it wound up being the millennial generation. The difference is that the predominance of scams that baby boomers and older generations fell for were over the phone, but the overwhelming scam numbers were all millennials. And where did they get it? The internet and their phones. So scammers target everyone. This is a program that we title Smart Seniors. My experience is that seniors are plenty smart. Most people are plenty smart. What these scammers are looking to do is take the control away from you and make you feel concerned enough to make actions that you would do in service of what you normally do, which is be a good person. And so the patterns and practices we identify is less in terms of what technology they have, although I commented on that before with the ticking and the headsets and using a computer. That is pretty common. But the methods are usually involves a computer and or a phone.
Wow. Okay. Is there like a hot spot where there are a lot of like states or is it different countries where these scammers are coming from? Like, are there just patterns all over the world or is it just,
well,
is it coming from
yes,
everywhere?
They can come from
basically?
anywhere.
Right.
Well, it's interesting. I'm doing this off the top, Patty. So if
Sure.
I'm imprecise on this, forgive me, but we actually were able to bust a scam group that was based out of Syracuse, scamming folks who were of Puerto Rican descent, mostly downstate, right around the time the hurricane happened a few years ago. That ripped from the patterns, Law and Order style I described. Literally, there was a hurricane, and then literally people from the Syracuse area, also of Puerto Rican descent and Spanish speaking, were scamming their neighbors and saying, we're hosting something to get Puerto Rico back, whatever. Please send money. Please send this. Please send that. And sure enough, it was going right in their pockets and not going to the island at all. And so again, we talked a little bit about patterns, and I think it's helpful when something is happening in your mind, in the news. Like I said, it's a common staple of IRS season that IRS calls go up. You can see charity calls go up around the holiday because charitable donations go up around the holidays. And we want to encourage charitable donations. We don't want to scare anyone. We just encourage folks to make sure that the groups they're giving to are actually going to spend the money as you intend.
Okay, and so what kind of, if you actually prosecute them, what kind of sentences do they get? Like,
Well, it depends
how-
on that particular case, because I don't want to speak out of turn. We could Google, and the trial might be still ongoing. So let me check on that one. But largely, we largely deal in restitution. So if we can get a scammer, we're looking for the money, as much of it as possible. If we can get them to serve time, we're certainly not opposed. It just depends. But what's actually key, and what I should emphasize, is how rarely we actually get to trumpet good news like I just did. I'm referencing this case because it stuck in my head, because it had a positive, we caught somebody answer. It's really hard to catch these folks, and the money's almost always so far gone if we do. So what we try to do, and what this program is a manifestation of, is try to do our best in terms of education and prevention. Because once that money's gone, I have heard heartbreaking stories here from North Hempstead to Montauk of folks who have come up to me privately or told people publicly so that they could learn from, people could learn from what happened to them, of people spending thousands, and it's long gone.
Wow, unbelievable. Well, I'm sure you heard about the Long Island granny who fooled the scammer. Did you hear about that?
That was a wonderful day in our office.
So she invited them back to her house and then had the police
Yes.
waiting for them. So the question that someone asked is, it's a very brave thing that she did, but could it be potentially dangerous for her? What do you think about her actions? Do you recommend people do that, or just let the?
I want to hesitate before recommending anything.
Right.
I did not hesitate prior on this call to recommend many things to folks here, but here's the smartest thing she did, was she recognized there was a problem and contacted the authorities, and she recognized it before she engaged with them further. So if you are on the phone with someone and you think it's a scam, it is in your best interest, to me, to at least get off the phone as soon as possible. But and then see the particular circumstances of this case. For those who are watching and might not know the details, because that could be anyone watching this now. This individual was contacted by a person who was a scammer. She reported it to the police, and I believe, if I'm remembering correct, Patty, family members too. And then, with working with the police, was able to lure them to her address and then bust this scammer in this wonderful moment that all of us could enjoy. And that can't happen without significant bravery on her part and coordination, which is important. So with just in my commentary on it, I'll limit it to, she's very brave. I'm glad she recognized the scam. I'm glad she contacted the authorities. Anything after that, she did in consultation with the authorities, and I'll stay back from commenting.
Okay, let's see, an attendee here says, let's see, I got an email from Chase that looked very official, so I called Chase and they told me they didn't send it. I often get fake AT&T texts that thank me for paying and offering me a gift. AT&T does not offer gifts. So let's see, and she also mentions trafficking. Scammers is the name of the documentary. They made hundreds of calls per day. Okay, so I don't really see a question, but I can agree with her. I get that all the time with my bank, and
Sure.
I just, whenever I get it, I close it. I call my bank. Did you just send me something? It looks so official. These people are so good at what they do. I actually was trying to sell something on Facebook Marketplace.
Okay.
And I got a text, and they wanted to buy what I had to offer. And they said, why don't we use this website? And I said, well, I don't have this website. So they said, well, let me send you, I'll send you the money to your Zelle account. I said, okay, great. So I gave them my phone number, and they send me an email that says, and I said, well, here's the deal. Until I get the Zelle, until I see it in my account, I'm not going to mail it to you. They said, oh, well, I'm sending the email. They sent me the email, and it looked, he had the name of my bank, Zelle, my phone. Obviously, I just gave him my phone number. And he said, okay, here's I just got a letter from the bank saying that the money is there. So I said, okay, give me a minute. So I called Zelle, I called the bank, I called Facebook, and I heard Facebook doesn't accept Zelle. So I knew it was a scam. And then I just,
Mm,
I just stopped immediately. But it's like, it's so hard
yeah.
to figure out what's what anymore. I
Yeah.
got to check, Facebook friends, the profiles now. I get texts from my friends, hey, how you doing? And I don't think anything of it. I'm fine. How are you? And then I'm getting so suspicious now that I call them up on the phone. Did you just text me? They said
Mm.
no. So I changed my Facebook. I guess, what do? Do you change your Facebook password? Is that what you do when it's an instant message?
Well, so there's a whole bunch going on there. Let me
Yeah,
comment very briefly
yeah.
on the brazenness of scammers, and then I'll talk about social media. Um, Here's how brazen scammers are. I've been with the Attorney General's office, as you mentioned, Patty, since 2015. The then Attorney General at the time was Eric Schneiderman. He was in his car, and we had been doing a lot of work on housing at the time. We had actually, this was right around the time of the Great Recession, 2011. So we actually did a lot of good work in order to get money from the big banks that crashed the economy and help bail and help with zombie homes here on Long Island. So the AG is in his car at the time, and he hears a jingle on the radio. The Attorney General just got money for you. Call this law firm's number. And the Attorney General was in the car, heard it, and said, that's me. These guys don't have anything to do. So we did call that number, and you better believe we friggin' closed that down. So, but that's the level of brazenness. They're doing it on the radio, referencing our office directly. So that's the level of brazenness some of these folks have. On social media, there's a couple of different things to talk about there. One thing that's important, and this actually goes back to the grandparent scam, and I'm embarrassed I forgot to mention this. A lot of times during the grandparent scam, when folks say they fell for it to a certain extent, this actually happened to me out in Montauk. I won't divulge the person's name, but she had fallen for the grandparent scam. The reason that she fell for it is because the person had known where the person was on vacation and had details about it. How did that person have the information? Because the grandchild had posted everything, as people that age do, and I'm not that far from that age, with what they were doing. So they knew when they parasailed, where they were in Cancun, who they were with, what color hair they were, everything. They knew everything because that was available online. So little things that can keep you safe, although you can't control your grandchildren doing that. When you go on vacation, those of you on this call, probably best not to mention that on social media, because people might know that would be a good time to check out your house. So we've seen connections to that as well. To answer now, Patty, in that long-winded manner, but there was a lot of touching on things I wanted to do. In terms of skepticism with Facebook, I saw in the chat here, somebody mentioned spoof accounts. That happens a lot. That doesn't necessarily mean that you need to change yours, but the person that it happened to definitely needs to investigate theirs. And you do need to make sure that if you accepted this person, that you do a pretty thorough check internally of any and all interactions with them, what information that you have online that could have been useful to a scam artist, and then evaluate it from that way going forward.
Okay, I have another question. I'm sure everybody else is getting this too. I get these calls almost daily for my car warranty. Now,
Oh, yeah.
now what's the deal with that? I mean, obviously, I lease a car, so the warranty's not expired. So immediately,
As do my wife and I. So yeah,
right.
same.
So what is the point? Is that just a bad scammer? I mean, is it just levels of degrees of cleverness, and this person is
Well,
these people doing
as
that?
I mentioned before, I used the snowflake analogy because no two snowflakes are the same. Yes, just as there are good NBA players and not good NBA players, some scammers are LeBron James and some are Chris Dudley. It just
Wow.
is. That's an old Knicks joke for anybody who got that. Enjoy.
I didn't.
But
Sorry.
okay, but in any event, yes, there are people who are potentially bad scammers out there. The thing that's interesting about that scam is that it's largely automated, and what we found in terms of scams that are typically automated is that they're looking to get something specific that has nothing to do with what the recording says. So we had heard about, this was popular 3 years ago, a scam that was called the Yes Scam. And their goal was to say, hi, is Patty Katz here? And for you to say,
Yes.
and now they have you recorded saying yes. And what they wanted to do with that in this particular scam, although I've heard it utilized in other ways, was that you would have gotten makeup or something mailed to you and your account charged. And when you tried to dispute it, or they signed you up after that for a free trial, and then they charged you for it. And when you tried to dispute it, they'd say, "We have you here saying yes."
Wow.
So that was one way it was used. There were other ways it was used, but that was one way I heard about. And that's oftentimes with the automated, they're looking for something a little bit less on the nose.
Okay. Karen Miller asks about Verizon scams that are ongoing now. Are you aware of those?
Verizon scams in terms of what, miss? If you don't mind terribly.
Yeah, I don't, it wasn't very specific. So Karen Miller, if you're listening, which I'm sure you are, would you just, give us a little more detail on your question? Because I'm not familiar with
Because
that.
I'm happy to talk about scams generally speaking. I don't know, and I
don't
don't
know
know of any
that one.
Verizon scams
Yeah.
off the top of my head. So Karen, if you can elucidate me, I'm anxious to learn.
Let's see, wait. The taste cameras are leveraged upward. Okay, I'm not getting this. Robin asks, I'm worried about my mother's safety from posting my father's recent obituary. Scammers
Oh.
use obituary to scam widows.
Yes, that's true. Scammers can use that. Believe it or not, that Blue Point thing that Blue Point meeting I referenced earlier was action packed, because not only did the fella stand up and say that, somebody else during the Q&A period was calling about the same, with somebody claiming that somebody had died and there was a will, or there was something contested. Their circumstances were different, so not applicable. But yes, that concern is absolutely warranted to have. That doesn't mean that what I would say that the way to approach it is, because you can't unring the bell in that particular instance, just I would say speak to that person about being mindful that once that's out there, it's highly likely that people could call and be scammers. But once it's out there, I don't know how to direct you to unring the bell. I can understand your concern completely, and I think it's a conversation you're going to have as a family.
Okay, thank you. Laura Weinberg, she asks an interesting question. A Nassau County Supreme Court judgment in 2015 indicated that restitutions from the funding wrongly taken was to go to the Breast Cancer Coalition. She's the president of the Breast Cancer Coalition. Great night, by the way.
Thank you for your work.
Yes, she's wonderful. This was going to be distributed through the Attorney General's Office of New York State. However, none of the Long Island groups received that funding. How do we find out where those restitutions are?
Oh, sure. I can talk to you about that offline. And I actually think I might have some details on that, but I would need to talk to individual. That's an individual one. I'll talk to you individually.
Okay, so I can give you the, I can give her your email.
Sure. And for everybody on here, I'll send you my
Okay,
email. I'll
maybe
put it
post
in the
your email.
chat.
That'd be great. That would be great.
My email will be in the chat right now. Please contact me.
Okay, Andrea Katz is smart. She says when somebody calls and says, is this Andrea Katz? She says, who's calling?
Who's calling? You're right.
Very good.
May I ask who's calling?
okay.
Or sure, yeah, that works.
That's a good answer. What about the Google business listing?
Google business listing in return to what?
I don't know. It's a question.
Well,
I was hoping you would know what that meant. I'm sorry.
Well, I don't want to speak. I think I have an idea, but if I'm wrong, I don't want to be pontificating something incorrectly and thus wasting your time.
Right.
So
let me
Google business listings. I've seen documentaries and news reports about them, and people wanting their ranking to be higher. If that's what you're speaking about, I wouldn't be able to comment on it in depth. And I certainly wouldn't want to prejudice anything that our attorneys are working on. So I guess I'll just stop.
Okay, we understand that. That's fine. Let's see. One of our members is saying she's getting faxes, and how can she get the company to stop even after she's called and asked, and she keeps getting these faxes? It doesn't sound like it's a scam, but it sounds like it's annoying. I don't know. Is there a way to get companies to stop bothering you?
Yeah, I mean, I would call the company first.
She did. She has been, and they still do.
That there isn't anything legally I could advise on that. Okay. So I could talk to you one-on-one about some things I might recommend, but I don't know that there's nothing I could do legally to make somebody stop faxing you. Although I am remarkably I think it's a remarkable state of affairs when someone's sending you unwanted faxes.
Okay. Is there a way, we're getting all these spam risk calls that we're getting, I think, obviously increased over the past couple of years. It's like all the time, every day. Is there any way to block them at all? Since you said that the phone, is it back to that first question, which is the robo?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, yes. You can block
Facebook?
individual numbers. You can do that via any and all basic phones. But yeah, I mean, it really is upsetting, and I understand. I've actually heard people, talk to me, and like I said, all over the island about the noise is annoying. And I can speak. I talk about my parents all the time. I'll do it once more. The reason my mother gets annoyed is because she was raised to answer her phone. My mom, Doreen Mary Robbins, grew up in Don Robbins' house. In Don Robbins' house, you answered the phone. I know my grandpa pretty well. You answered the phone. And so it also we were raised that way too. It felt rude to be home and not answer the phone. But the honest answer is it just isn't that way anymore. If you don't recognize the number, that's why you bought the answer machine. And if it's your cell phone, you can just press the button or text them and say, hey, can you text me? And people have said to me before, that's hard for me because I have doctor's appointments. And I completely empathize, actually, because I have plenty of doctor's appointments in me and my wife's life, and they're not always great to work with. But what I have noticed is that most of the time they do leave an answering machine message. And they identify themselves pretty quickly as a doctor's office. So in the rare instance where I do answer a phone number that I don't recognize on my personal cell phone, I can identify really quick if it's somebody I want to deal with for much longer than that. And the other thing is that I have to answer the phone because when it's my work phone, it could be you calling me to tell me about something wrong, and I work for you. So I'm going to answer the phone. And I cannot tell you, and probably shouldn't, but I'm going to anyway, because I've started this road, how many scam calls I get. I work for Tish. I have her personal cell phone number. They still call me. So they call everybody. It's a buckshot approach. Don't be offended and think it's only happening to you. It happens to all of us, including Tish.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, Tish mentioned at our fundraiser that you or your office, her office is doing all of this work for a lot of scammer stuff. So do you actually catch a lot of them? I mean, I'm sorry.
Catch it. I'm sorry, I didn't mean this. I thought I was going to cut you off.
No, are you actually prosecuting a lot of people? I mean, do you actually break up a lot of scammers and are able to do this? And I know
we had a really good hit rate with COVID scams, believe it or not, although that's not something to be happy about, or, to see your fellow man during the middle of a pandemic scamming each other. But we wound up during COVID getting a lot of different cases resolved because there were just so many things happening out there that just patently were, if not necessarily quote unquote scams in the neat sense that you're going to read about in the brochure that I provide, more along the lines of just either misinterpreting some of the guidelines that were out at the time, or just people not being able to do the right thing in a timely enough manner. For example, the most famous one we had at the time were gyms. New York sports clubs were charging folks for months for their gym memberships, despite the fact that the gyms had been ordered closed. And we had to do a big case to make sure that everybody got their money back. We were able to be very successful at that. That's not necessarily the scam in the sense where I think that the folks here are coming to hear about, where it's a few folks.
But it is taking advantage of New York State residents.
Yeah,
right.
but it is, but yeah, COVID, we saw a lot of that, and we had a pretty good success rate of fighting it. But with the scams I'm talking about that are a little bit more universal, the phones, the emails, we get as many as we can, but it's really hard. I have folks after presentations like this who are wonderful, who email me all the numbers that called them that they know are scam numbers. And then I take them and I talk to local PD, and I'll talk to folks in our office. But because of the routing technology, the spoofing I talked about earlier, we can't trace them back as easily as you can on an episode of CSI. It doesn't work like that. And a lot of times these are like burner dummy phones that you can get at 7-Eleven. So the second that they think that line is not worth keeping, they'll throw right in the garbage. And another thing that happens, because at the higher end of the sophisticated scams, this happened I was with Senator Todd Kaminsky. I'll never forget it. Long Beach. A woman stood up and she had one of the TVs where the phone number comes up on top. So she had Cablevision, I think, offers that service, or it's Optimum Net, whatever. She had one of those. The number that came up that was calling her was her phone number. So she was terrified. She was 80 something years old. She was afraid somebody might have snuck into her house. We literally had to go talk to her and like calm her down and make sure she was okay. But it's law of averages. Scammer managed to just hit the number he was dialing with the number he was impersonating.
Wow, that's scary. That's really scary. So your office, in New York State, is your office basically the main place that would do this kind of, work? Or are there other organizations that are also focusing on trying to stop scamming and, and these kind of phone calls or emails or whatever?
Sure. It's an all levers approach. Like I said, we gathered together a coalition of all 49 other attorneys general to pressure the FCC and to pressure the telecom companies and to pressure both administrations, whether they be Trump or Biden, to get really strict with the phone companies to provide more options for folks, because prevention is the best way to fight these guys. But it is an all governmental approach. And one of the things that is problematic, Patty, you alluded to this early, is that a lot of these scammers are not just calling from Long Island or not just calling from New York State. They're not even calling from our country, which is why they don't care about a do not call registry. They don't even care about our laws if we were to outlaw it, because they don't live in this country. So when a caller's calling or emailing from someplace else, it's very hard to get them without international cooperation. And that is very much in short supply. However, when this happened 5 years ago under the Obama, well, no longer now, sorry. But in the last year of the Obama administration, I used to walk around with this press release in my hand. I was so happy about it, that we had managed to work with the Attorney General's office, and the Obama administration had worked with the Indian government to crack down on a scammer doing the IRS scam in India that scammed countless Americans. And we wound up locking up like 13 or 14 people. I walked around with that press release like tattooed to my head for a year, but we haven't. Victories like that are celebrated and nurtured and told like a loving war story by folks like me, but they are few and far between. But we all are trying.
Wow, that's amazing. It sounds like you're doing a great job, though.
We're trying.
One other question: How do they get our phone numbers? Is it just like, or do they have like nonstop numbers that just click by until the numbers fall into place? How do they actually?
That's part of it. A white pages is part of it, or yellow pages. And then also, when people see on 60 Minutes or any program that analyzes whether there are any of these data breaches or what companies sell and buy data from you, that's what they're buying. They're buying your address, they're buying your phone number. In some instances, and in some areas it's legal, some areas it's not. But your phone number can be, and it could be gotten from something that you didn't do. Say you're the perfect person. You're strict about everything. You never give your cell phone to anybody who isn't a loved one. You don't bank online. You don't buy anything. You're old fashioned. You carry cash. You walk in to see the teller at a bank. They can still get your phone number. Why? Because your family member who doesn't do that kind of precaution can get hacked. And in their phone will be your number.
Wow. I have one more question. Okay, you've been very
Sure.
generous with your time.
You've been generous with your comments, and I appreciate you and your group.
Okay, one of the most common examples of attempted fraud I see are from hijacked Facebook profiles that then try to message others with virus-infected links. What do they get from doing this?
Oh, that's a good question. I can't always leap into the head of the scammer. Like I said, they're all different. Some of them are the old, the Dark Knight line. Some people just want to see the world burn. Other people could be trying to hack into your computer to see if there's any data on there that is worthwhile to them, whether that be banking, credit card information, or like I said, your personal data. There is money to be made from personal data from everybody. Yes, even you who thinks they're very boring. I had to break it to my father that even though he doesn't answer the phone, even though he doesn't bank online, they still want to know that he likes golf because they still want to sell him a new set of clubs.
Wow. We're doomed.
Well, no, we're not doomed. What we are is realizing that there's a challenge, but that challenge has always been there. There have been hucksters and fraudsters since time immemorial. It's amazing. My wife and I are very much into this, the new HBO series on the Gilded Age. But if you watch either that or Downton Abbey or any sort of period piece or read any sort of history book, I'm reading a great book by H.W. Brands on the Gilded Age, actually, because I'm just all in on this show. There are hucksters since time immemorial. What you always have as a regular person who minds their business and gets up every day doing the right thing is control. You don't have to talk to them. You don't have to give them your money. And you do not have to deal with them any more than answering the phone. And you don't even have to do that.
Wow. Well, thank you. On that note, thank you so much, TJ, for helping us become, more savvy recognizing scams. Hopefully we'll get better at this and we won't get scammed thanks to all this information. And I just want to remind you, TJ was kind enough to send me an email with lots of links, and I'll be sending that out in the next few days to all of our members and to all of you that were on this meeting tonight. And please join us. I just want to let you know next month, our March 9th, our speaker is going to be Liuba Gretchen Shirley. She is the head of Vote Mama. She's terrific, wonderful speaker. So please join us then, March 9th. And to join Reach Out America, we'd love you all to join if you haven't. Just go to our website, reachout-america.com, hit the donate button and write in the notes membership. It's only $45, best game in town. And you get wonderful speakers like TJ. So thank you all, be well. And we hope to see you in March. Thanks again. And thanks, TJ.
Happy Valentine's Day and St. Patrick's Day.
Valentine's Day.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.